talk about any goddamn thing I want, you son of a bitch!
You want to dance, Angel Boobs? Screw, baby.
Goddamn you!
When you saw Virginia Woolf, you instinctively knew that these words were going to hit the American public like an angry fist.
Damn right.
Sons of bitches.
Bastard.
Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf drove the heaviest stake into the heart of film censorship.
Christ nuts!
Dirty-minded.
Goddamn explosion you've ever heard.
It was a significant way station on the way to some kind of liberalization of the production code of movies. That's its historical significance.
You bastard. Damn it. Jeez. Snap! Like hell I will.
And they were very nervous about the language.
Up yours.
It was in June of 1966 that Edward Albee's play, which had been a big hit on Broadway, it was brought to the screen by Warner Brothers.
Who's afraid of Virginia Woolf?
I had been on the job just a month, no more than a month. Suddenly, I'm confronted now with something that was unique, because what you heard on the screen was language that had never been ever displayed or heard on the screen before.
Well, at that time, Jack Valenti was, relatively new to his job as head of the Motion Picture Association. I think that he understood his job, probably from the moment he took it, that he would have to address all the bubbling controversy about how people spoke and behaved on the screen. That, there needed to be more realistic adult behavior in movies at that point.
Tut, tut, tut.
Tut yourself, you old floozy.
This was a pioneering film in pushing the boundaries. Now, you have to understand, beginning in 1930, for 30 years, the movie industry was ruled by one of my predecessors named Will Hayes, who conceived the Hayes Code, which I counted to be a draconian piece of censorship. But in those days, the major studios owned all the theaters. And if you didn't get a seal of approval from the Hayes office, you literally couldn't find a play date for your films. The perimeters were set, and people knew what they could say and what they couldn't say. So this film was like a burning arrow that's thrown into a haystack. It created a lot of stir.
There was a memo that came from Jeffrey Sherlock, who was head of the production code at this time, and it said quite simply that the play was unfilmable as it was.
A great, big, fat flop!
Stop it, Mother.
I hope that was an empty bottle, George. You can't afford to waste good liquor. Not on your salary, not on an associate professor's salary.
They do say things that are kind of, outrageous, Less so now when you go back to it. I mean, there is a little bit sitting here in 2006, you see, that was bothering people, that phrase. Now, the big difference is, because Albee was a very good writer, there's real wit in those exchanges.
There were hundreds and hundreds of red-penciled words and phrases from Sherlock. I mean, it was a complete evisceration.
So they were under a kind of implicit threat anyway. And when Jack Warner said, just take it out unrated, it sent the fear of Beelzebub through the moralistic part of the motion picture industry. What if he did? What if it was a success?
Is that a threat, George, huh?
That's a threat, Martha.
You're gonna get it, baby.
Be careful, Martha. I'll rip you to pieces.
You're not man enough. You haven't the guts.
Now, Sherlock, from the onset, was on to this whole notion of adult film, which was happening in the post-war period. And he was an enlightened man, a very educated man, and he was very sympathetic to films that were made for adults, as he was to this film. So on the one hand, he told, Jack Warner, it will not get a seal. But on the other side of the mouth, he said, you know what to do, Jack? Go to the review board. Try to get them to change our verdict.
There was an appeals board mechanism set up of distributors and exhibitors. and they also upheld Sherlock. And I made it known that I wasn't going to summarily overrule Jeffrey Sherlock and whatever he said and whatever the appeals board did. And we flew out to meet with Jack Warner and his consigliere. That meeting lasted a couple of hours. And when we got done, Jack Warner decided he would take out one phrase called hump the hostess and another phrase called screw you.
When a film that had controversial elements like Virginia Woolf did, the director would shoot both ways. So if they had problems with censors, they could go, they would be already in the can, the film would be already in the can, and they could go with the one that was the clean version. Well, Mike Nichols didn't do any cover shots. Mike Nichols did not want the film tampered with. Screw You, they had them change it to Goddamn You, and they brought another actress in to dub the line.
Yeah, I could see why he might not think that would be as bad as Goddamn You, but he said, how are we going to fit Goddamn? It's so much longer than Screw. So I saw what Sam did. He actually started that shot with her back to the camera. It's a close shot of Martha. By the time she spins her head around and you see her face, all she says is you. She doesn't even say goddamn. So you never, and you is the same.
Goddamn you!
And then Jack Warner agreed that he would put the film out with only adults allowed, which had never happened before. So there was a mollifying effect at that time. The movie went out with adults only. It got a huge amount of publicity.
I said, I warn you.
I'm impressed.
I warned you not to go too far.
I'm just beginning.
And then after that came Blow Up, Antonioni's film, which for about 10 to 15 seconds, for the first time on the screen, you saw nudity, two little teeny boppers cavorting around, mostly with their backside showing. And so that caused another rumple in the public conscience, and the press took that up. So those two films ignited a great deal of debate, and the whole country was in a kind of a ferment. So it was an unusual time in the culture of the country. What it revealed to me was that the past was done. The old ways that we used to guide movies was over. I wasn't quite sure what the future was going to be, the shape and form of that future, but I knew it was going to be different. And for the next year and a half, I began to fool around with various kinds of remedial action.
Valenti had always had the notion that there should be a rating system. I mean, to that degree, and Jack is kind of an old-fashioned Texas liberal guy, you know. He really did believe that there should be a formalization of the phrase different strokes for different folks, you know. And it is one of his proud achievements, is that thing.
And finally, on November 1st, 1968, 2 years after Virginia Woolf, I inaugurated the new movie classification system of G, PG, R, and X.
So that's what you're after, is it? What are we going to have? Blue games for the guests, huh? Everything in its place, Martha. Everything in its own good time.
And the pornographers were saying double X, triple X. They stole the rating, and I changed it from X to NC-17, no children under 17 allowed, which was a kind of a acronym that didn't lend itself to exploitation very well. And that's pretty much what it is now. But that's the genesis of how the rating system came into being, and the ignition for this were these two movies, Virginia Woolf and Blow Up.
All of this because of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. Again, it drove the heaviest stake in the heart of film censorship.
This, to me, was kind of like what Fort Sumter was to the Civil War. The first shots were fired in South Carolina, and that started the Civil War. Virginia Woolf started the unraveling of the old and the introduction of new ways to let parents know the content of films and to help guide them so they can make their own decisions about what movies they want their children to see or not to see.
Who's afraid of Virginia Woolf? Virginia Woolf.
I am, George.
Who's afraid of Virginia Woolf?
I am.